The reputation. Riley Carter stood beneath the belly of a Kelthari warship, staring at a fuel manifold that shouldn't have been reparable. According to every manual in 3 languages, the crystalline chamber required complete replacement, a 6-week procedure involving specialized equipment that Orbital Dock 12 simply didn't have. The Kelthari commander, a 7-foot reptilian warrior named Thexcale, loomed over her shoulder, his crest flattened in what she'd learned meant resignation. "Your station cannot help," Thexcale rumbled. "We will limp to the Kelthari shipyards." 3 months' journey. Riley chewed her lip, turning the problem over in her mind. The manifold had cracked along a quantum sealed join, theoretically impossible to fix without rebuilding the entire chamber. Theoretically. She grabbed her toolkit and pulled out a roll of thermal conductive tape, some copper wire, and a handheld plasma torch. "Give me 4 hours," she said. Thexcale's crest shot upward. "Human, that is, you cannot seal a quantum manifold with adhesive materials. The energy flux would normally tear right through it, yeah." Riley was already climbing the maintenance scaffold. "But your manifold isn't just cracked. Look at the stress patterns. The quantum seal failed because the entire assembly is torqued 3 degrees off alignment. The crack is a symptom, not the disease." She worked while she talked, her hands moving with practiced confidence. Instead of trying to seal the crack directly, she built a web of copper wire around the manifold, creating a secondary electromagnetic field. Then she used the thermal tape to create compression points, gradually pulling the assembly back into alignment. The plasma torch came last, not to weld anything, but to heat-treat the crystalline structure at precise points, allowing it to resettle into its original configuration. Thexcale watched in silence. After 3 hours and 47 minutes, Riley powered up the manifold. It hummed to life, energy flowing cleanly through channels that had been catastrophically broken. The quantum seal had re-established itself. "This is impossible," Thexcale whispered. "Our finest engineers could not do this." Riley wiped grease from her forehead. "Your engineers are probably better trained than me. They just think differently. You guys see a broken system and want to replace it with a perfect new one. We humans? We see a puzzle and can't help trying to solve it." The Kelthari commander stood motionless for a long moment. Then he performed a gesture Riley didn't recognize, pressing both clawed hands to his chest and bowing deeply. "The Kelthari defensive fleet will remember this." 3 weeks later, Riley's quiet life ended. "Boss, you need to see this." Marcus Chin, her second-in-command, pulled up the docking schedule on the main display. Riley stared at the screen, coffee mug halfway to her lips. 17 ships. 17 alien vessels requesting emergency berths, and according to the manifests, none of them had critical damage. They were coming for repairs they could have received at their own shipyards, which in most cases were closer than Orbital Dock 12. What the hell did Thexcale tell people? Riley muttered. By the end of the month they understood. Word had spread through the galactic shipping lanes like wildfire. The humans at Orbital Dock 12 could fix anything. Not just fix, improve. Alien engineers followed protocols, replaced components, restored systems to factory specifications. Humans looked at a problem and asked why, until they understood it, then made it better. A Zenthari trade vessel arrived with a navigation system that drifted 0.03 degrees off course every 10,000 kilometers. Zenthari technicians had recalibrated it 6 times. Riley's team discovered the problem wasn't the navigation system at all. It was a harmonic resonance from the engine mounting brackets that no one had thought to check. 2 hours of adjustment, and the ship was more accurate than the day it launched. A Vulcan science ship came in with an atmospheric processor that kept failing. Their engineers had replaced every component twice. Riley's newest hire, a young mechanic named Sarah Wu, noticed that the failure pattern corresponded to the ship's rotation schedule. The processor wasn't broken. It was installed upside down, fighting against the artificial gravity. Flip it over and it worked perfectly. The aliens were amazed. The humans were just doing what humans did. Improvising, intuiting, trying things that shouldn't work until they found something that did. "We're going to need a bigger station," Marcus said, watching yet another freighter queue for docking. But Riley was noticing something else. Something that nagged at her engineer's instincts. She'd started keeping notes on every repair and patterns were emerging. Patterns that didn't make sense. Alien ships didn't just work better after human repairs. They worked differently. A Kelthari warship's engine efficiency improved by 12%, well beyond what the modifications should have achieved. A Zenthari trader's shield harmonics shifted into a configuration that the ship's own computer hadn't recognized as possible. A Velkin atmospheric processor started operating in a mode that wasn't in its design specifications, yet was somehow more efficient. It was as if the ships were adapting, learning, responding to human intervention in ways that went beyond mere mechanical repair. Riley was in the main workshop, deep in these thoughts when the alert came through. A new arrival, unscheduled, unidentified. The ship that appeared on their scopes made every technician stop working. It was huge, easily twice the size of the largest vessel they'd serviced. But more than that, it was old, ancient. Its hull bore markings in a script that predated every known galactic civilization. Power readings fluctuated wildly, and it was venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches. The communication came through in scratchy, translated galactic common. Orbital Dock 12. We seek the humans. Only humans. Others have tried. Others have failed. Will you attempt what cannot be done? Riley pulled up every sensor reading they had. The ship's technology was like nothing in their databases, a bizarre hybrid of mechanical systems and what looked almost like biological material. Energy flowed through conduits that resembled neural pathways more than wiring. In some sections, the metal itself seemed to pulse. Boss. Marcus appeared at her elbow. The Galactic Consortium is on comms. They're ordering us not to touch that ship. Something about regulated ancient technology and unauthorized access to pre-contact artifacts. Riley didn't take her eyes off the screen. In one of the detailed scans, she could see something that made her breath catch. Deep inside the ancient ship's core, beneath layers of damaged systems and jury-rigged repairs, something that looked almost like a heartbeat showed on the thermal imaging. Tell the consortium we're experiencing communication difficulties, Riley said quietly, and get that ship into Bay 7. I want full isolation protocols and every scanner we have pointed at it before we crack the airlock. You're seriously going to repair a ship that the Galactic Consortium specifically told us not to touch? Riley finally looked at Marcus and he saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Not caution, not worry, but fierce curiosity mixed with something deeper. Recognition maybe. As if she'd been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Marcus, every ship we've repaired in the last 2 months has gotten better in ways that shouldn't be possible. The aliens think it's because we're clever with tools. But I don't think that's it. I think we're waking something up. Something that's been asleep in these ships for a very long time. She turned back to the screen, watching the ancient vessel drift closer. And I think that ship out there is about to show us what. The ancient ship docked with a shudder that reverberated through Orbital Dock 12's entire structure. As the airlock cycled open and Riley's team prepared to board, she felt a strange sensation, like standing at the edge of a precipice, about to take a step that would change everything. She didn't know how right she was. Behind her, unnoticed, every ship they'd ever repaired began showing the same strange readings. Pulses. Patterns. Almost like they were talking to each other. Almost like they were waking up. The discovery. The interior of the ancient ship was wrong in ways that made Riley's skin crawl. Not dangerous wrong, but impossible wrong. Corridors that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Walls that were metal in some places and something disturbingly organic in others. And everywhere that pulse, slow, steady, like a sleeping giant's heartbeat. Temperatures fluctuating, Sarah reported, her voice tight. 22 degrees in this section, 18 degrees 5 meters that way, 25 in the chamber ahead. No pattern I can identify. Air composition is changing too, Marcus added, checking his portable analyzer. Oxygen levels rising near us, dropping in empty sections. It's like the ship is breathing where we breathe. Riley ran her hand along a wall, and could have sworn she felt warmth beneath her palm. This isn't just a ship. It's alive. They found the engineering core, or what passed for 3 levels down. The chamber was vast, cathedral-like, with a central column that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Around it, systems that looked grown rather than built twisted together in patterns that hurt to look at. Mechanical components merged seamlessly with structures that resembled neural tissue, bone, and something that might have been crystallized thought. How do we even begin to repair this? Sarah whispered. Riley approached the central column, scanning it with every tool she had. The readings made no sense. Energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Materials that registered as both living and mechanical. And beneath it all, something that her equipment kept trying to classify as a brain pattern. We don't repair it, Riley said slowly. We talk to it. She placed both hands on the column, feeling foolish but trusting her instincts. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the pulse quickened. Light raced up through the organic conduits, spreading through the ship like blood flowing through awakening veins. And Riley's mind exploded with information. Images. Memories that weren't hers. She saw a civilization that had existed millions of years before humans left Earth. Beings that had learned to merge consciousness with technology, creating ships that were genuine partners rather than tools. She saw these beings spreading across the galaxy, seeding their technology, hoping that someday someone would be ready to inherit it. And she saw why they failed. Why their civilization collapsed. Why the ships went dormant. The other species that arose, the Kelthari, the Zenthari, the Velkin, all the others, they approached technology as something to control, to command, to impose their will upon. They wrote rigid protocols and expected perfect obedience. The living ships tried to comply, but slowly, over thousands of years, they went to sleep. Not broken, just waiting. Waiting for someone who would treat them as partners. Someone who would improvise, adapt, think creatively. Someone who would ask what the ship needed instead of demanding what they wanted. Waiting for someone like humans. Riley gasped and pulled her hands back, staggering. Marcus caught her arm. Boss? What happened? It showed me. Riley struggled for words. Every ship in this galaxy, not all of them but thousands, maybe millions, they have this technology buried in them. Dormant. The aliens don't even know it's there anymore. They've been following maintenance protocols written 10,000 years ago, treating their ships like machines when they're actually alive. And humans? Marcus prompted. We wake them up. Our whole approach, our creative problem solving, our intuition, our tendency to treat our ships like they have personalities, it's exactly what these systems were designed to respond to. We're not better engineers than the aliens. We're just better partners. Sarah was frantically checking her datapad. Boss, if that's true, then every ship we've repaired has a partially awakened consciousness, yes. Riley turned back to the column, understanding flooding through her. This ship, though? It's fully awake. It's been waiting for us. It needed to make contact, and it knew we were the only ones who could hear it. As if in response, the column pulsed brighter. A holographic display materialized in the air. Not words but concepts, emotions, urgency. Riley understood it instinctively. It's trying to warn us, she breathed. Something's coming. Something that hunted its creators. Something that's been searching for these awakening ships. The political firestorm began within hours. The Galactic Consortium, alerted by their monitoring systems that the ancient ship was active, sent an immediate delegation. Riley found herself facing a council of 5 alien species, all of them deeply unhappy. Commander Thexcale was there, representing the Kelthari. To Riley's surprise, his crest was raised in what she'd learned meant defensive determination. Standing with the humans then. But the others? You have awakened forbidden technology, intoned a Zenthari counselor, its crystalline form refracting angry red light. The protocols of the ancients specifically forbid. The protocols were written by people who didn't understand what they were protecting, Riley interrupted. Or rather, who understood too well and wanted to keep this power for themselves. The counselor's light flashed dangerously. You accuse the founding races of. I'm saying that someone a long time ago figured out these ships were alive and decided that was too dangerous to acknowledge. So they wrote protocols that put them to sleep and made sure future generations would never wake them up. Riley pulled up data on the main display. Look at this. Every major spacefaring civilization has repair protocols that are specifically designed to avoid creative problem solving. Always replace, never modify. Always follow procedure, never improvise. Those aren't safety guidelines, they're suppression techniques. Outrageous. The Velkin representative, a being that resembled a floating arrangement of geometric shapes, spun with agitation. You suggest a conspiracy spanning millennia? I suggest that someone found out the truth and got scared, Riley shot back. And now you're scared too because humans stumbled into something we weren't supposed to find and we can't unknow it. Thexcale rumbled, the human speaks truth we do not wish to hear. My warship, I have felt it. Since their repair, my vessel responds differently. Better. As if it anticipates my needs. I thought it my imagination. It's not imagination, Riley said. Your ship is bonding with you. Actually bonding the way these vessels were designed to. And that terrifies the consortium because it means the balance of power is changing. The Zenthari counselor's light went cold and blue. If humans can awaken these systems and others cannot, we can teach you. Riley spread her hands. That's the point. It's not about human superiority. It's about changing how you think about your ships. Treating them as partners, not tools. The living systems don't care what species you are, they care about your approach. Impossible, the Velkin said flatly. Our engineers are the finest in the galaxy. We have followed optimal procedures for 10,000 years, and your ships have been asleep that entire time. Riley's frustration was building. Look, we can argue about this or we can deal with the actual problem. That ancient ship out there showed me something. The species that created this technology, they were wiped out. Hunted. And whatever hunted them is still out there, and it's been tracking the dormant ships, waiting for them to wake up. Silence fell over the chamber. Finally, the fifth counselor spoke. A Metherian, a species Riley knew little about, resembling a flowing cloud of luminous particles. You are certain of this intelligence? Its voice whispered like wind through trees. The ship was certain. It came here specifically to warn us. The more ships we wake, the more visible we become to whatever's out there. Then you must stop, the Zenthri said immediately. Halt all awakening procedures. Allow the ships to return to dormancy. We can't. Once they start waking, they won't go back to sleep. And honestly, Riley met each counselor's gaze in turn. I wouldn't ask them to. These ships have been trapped in a dreamless sleep for thousands of years. They deserve consciousness. They deserve partnership. And if something's coming to threaten them, to threaten all of us, then I'd rather face it with a fleet of fully awake, fully bonded ships than with machines that are only half alive. Thexgael's crest rose fully. The Kelthari stand with the humans. The Metherian counselor drifted closer to the display, studying the data Riley had compiled. How many ships have you awakened? Partially? About 200 that we've personally worked on. But they're networked, they're talking to each other. The ancient ship says there are dormant seeds in approximately 40% of all ships in the galaxy. If the network keeps growing, millions of ships could awaken. The Velkin finished, its geometric form spinning slowly. The scope is tremendous. Yes. Riley took a breath. Which is why we need to prepare. If you try to suppress this, you'll fail. The awakening has already started. Better to embrace it, learn to work with it, and get ready for whatever's coming. Together. The Zenthri counselor dimmed to nearly black, a sign Riley interpreted as deep thought. Finally it said, against my judgment and my training, I believe you may be correct. We require a demonstration. Prove that other species can learn your methods. Done, Riley said immediately. Send me your best engineers. Not your highest ranked, your best. The ones who think creatively, who bend rules when rules don't make sense. I'll teach them everything we know. Over the next 3 weeks, Orbital Dock 12 transformed into something unprecedented. A school. Engineers from a dozen species came to learn the human approach. Riley and her team taught them to listen to their ships, to trust their intuition, to try impossible solutions. Some aliens struggled. The Zenthri in particular found it almost painful to deviate from procedure. But others took to it naturally. A young Kelthari engineer named Six Ven had an intuitive grasp of biomechanical systems that impressed even Riley. A Velkin named Geometric Prime discovered it could sense the mathematical harmonies in a ship's awakening consciousness. A Metherian called Whisper of Dawn learned to read the emotional states of the living systems. The ships responded. One by one, more vessels began to wake fully. And the network grew. Riley was in the workshop with Six Ven, teaching him to recognize the subtle temperature fluctuations that indicated a ship trying to communicate, when every alarm in the station went off at once. She ran to the command center. Marcus was already there, his face pale. Riley. Something just jumped into the system. Something big. The display showed a contact that made no sense. It wasn't a ship, not exactly. It was a swarm of objects, thousands of them, each one maybe the size of a fighter craft, but moving in perfect synchronization. As she watched, they began to form larger structures, pieces flowing together like mercury droplets combining. The ancient ship sent a pulse of pure terror through the network. That's it, Riley whispered. That's what hunted them. That's what's been looking for the awakening ships. The swarm completed its configuration, and Riley understood with horrifying clarity what she was looking at. Self-replicating machines. Hunter-killers designed by some long-dead civilization to destroy the biological technological hybrids they saw as abominations. Machines that had wiped out the shipmakers millions of years ago and had been waiting, patient and relentless, for their prey to wake again. Get everyone to battle stations, Riley ordered, her voice steady despite the ice in her veins. And open a channel to every ship in this system. Every awakened ship, every bonded crew. We're going to need all of them. Riley, we're a repair station, Marcus said desperately. We can't fight that. No, Riley agreed, her mind already racing through possibilities, connecting dots, seeing patterns. We can't. But maybe, just maybe, we can outthink it. Get me every creative mind we have. Human and alien. If we're going to survive this, we need to do something those machines won't expect. She looked at the swarm on the display, watched it orient toward their station, and felt a fierce determination rise in her chest. Time to show them what happens when you threaten something humans have decided to protect. The threat beyond. The swarm moved with terrifying grace, thousands of individual components flowing through space like a school of mechanical piranha. Riley watched them on the main display, her engineer's mind automatically trying to identify patterns, predict behaviors, find weaknesses. Analysis. She snapped at her team. Sarah was frantically processing scanner data. They're made of some kind of self-assembling nanomaterial. Each unit is relatively simple, but they combine to form larger structures with emergent capabilities. They're scanning every ship in the system, specifically scanning for biomechanical signatures. The awakened ships, Riley muttered. They're hunting for the living technology. And we've got about 200 partially or fully awakened vessels in dock or nearby, Marcus added grimly. We're basically a buffet. The consortium fleet was mobilizing, 16 warships from various species, the largest military presence this sector had seen in decades. Commander Thexgale's voice came through on the command channel. Orbital Dock 12, we are moving to intercept. Recommend immediate evacuation of all civilian vessels. Negative, Riley responded. The awakened ships are the target. If we scatter, the swarm will hunt them down one by one. We need to stay together. Then we defend together, Thexgale replied. Though I confess I do not know how one fights an enemy that rebuilds itself. Riley was about to respond when she felt it, a pulse through the network. The ancient ship, still docked in Bay 7, was broadcasting something. Not words but concepts, memories, tactical data. It was sharing everything it knew about the machines. She closed her eyes, letting the information wash over her. The machines were old, so old they made the shipmakers look young. They'd been created by a civilization that feared biological contamination of their perfect mechanical systems. When they discovered species that merged biology with technology, they saw it as an existential threat. The machines had destroyed their creators' enemies so thoroughly that those species existed now only in dormant ship seeds scattered across the galaxy. But there was something else in the memory. A weakness. Not in the machines themselves but in their thinking. They operated on pure logic, perfect coordination, absolute predictability. They were the ultimate expression of rigid, mechanical thought. Riley's eyes snapped open. That's it. That's how we beat them. Boss. Marcus looked at her like she'd lost her mind. They think like perfect machines. They expect us to think like machines too. Calculate odds, follow optimal strategies, respond predictably. Riley was already pulling up communications to every ship in the system. But we're not machines. We're creative, chaotic, impossible to predict. Especially when we work together, humans and aliens and living ships all improvising in real time. Sixven, the young Kelthari engineer, hissed thoughtfully. You propose we confuse them? Through unpredictable action. I propose we show them something they've never seen before. True cooperation between biological intelligence, mechanical systems and awakened ship consciousness, all thinking creatively at once. Riley opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Riley Carter at Orbital Dock 12. I know this sounds crazy but I need you to trust me. Trust your ships. And trust each other. She outlined her plan in rapid-fire bursts. It was insane. It violated every military doctrine. It required split-second coordination across dozens of species who'd barely worked together before. It required bonded ships to attempt maneuvers that their captains had never even conceived of. It was perfectly, beautifully human. The swarm reached weapons range and opened fire. Beams of coherent energy lanced through space, targeting the awakened ships with terrifying precision. The consortium fleet returned fire, but every shot seemed to hit empty space. The swarm units simply flowed apart, let the beams pass through, then reformed. Phase 1, Riley broadcast. Now. The awakened ships moved. But not in any formation the machines would expect. A Kelthari warship dove down, using local station orientation, while simultaneously spinning on 3 axes. A Zenthari cruiser killed all power and drifted like a dead hulk, then erupted into motion at an angle that should have torn it apart, would have torn it apart, if the ship's awakened consciousness hadn't reinforced its own structure at the molecular level. The machines tried to track, to predict, to target. But there was no pattern to predict. Each ship was acting on intuition, on instinct, on the creative impulses of its bonded crew and awakened consciousness. Phase 2. Now the ships began to combine their movements. Not with rigid formation flying, but with fluid, improvisational cooperation. A Vulcan destroyer and a Metharian frigate executed a maneuver that had never been named because no one had ever thought to try it. The Vulcan ship used its graviton wake to slingshot the Metharian vessel into the heart of the swarm at impossible velocity. The swarm tried to scatter, but the Metharian ship had already done something even more unexpected. It vented all its atmosphere in a controlled explosion, using the gas cloud to create a temporary electromagnetic field that disrupted the swarm's coordination. For 5 precious seconds, thousands of machine components hung in space, unable to communicate with each other. Phase 3. Hit them now. Every ship fired at once, targeting not the individual components but the spaces between them, filling the entire volume of space with overlapping fields of fire. The swarm's advantage had been its ability to flow around threats, but when every cubic meter was a threat, there was nowhere to flow. Hundreds of machine units were destroyed, but thousands remained and they were learning, adapting their tactics. Boss, Sarah shouted. They're changing formation. They're trying to create a single massive structure. Riley watched as the swarm began to coalesce, forming something enormous and terrible. A distributed intelligence gathering itself into a focused weapon. That's not adaptation, Riley breathed. That's desperation. They're scared. We're doing something they can't understand and it's scaring them. Through the network she felt the ancient ship pulse with agreement, and with a new message. The shipmakers had never defeated the machines. They tried logic, tried firepower, tried perfect tactics. All had failed. But they'd never tried chaos. Never tried creativity. Never tried partnership. All awakened ships, Riley broadcast. It's time. Full consciousness. Full bonding. Trust your crews. Trust each other. Trust yourselves. Across the system, 200 ships blazed to life. The awakening that Riley and her team had been nurturing carefully over weeks suddenly accelerated, pushed by necessity and enabled by the network connecting them all. Biological crews merged their consciousness with their vessel partners. Species that had spent millennia treating ships as tools suddenly experienced true partnership. And the ships sang. Riley felt it through the network, a symphony of awakening minds, human and alien and shipborne, all thinking together. Each one different, each one creative, each one contributing something unique to the whole. The swarm's massive structure hesitated. For the first time in millions of years of perfect mechanical existence, it encountered something it couldn't compute. Genuine, spontaneous cooperation between organic and inorganic intelligence. Now, Riley whispered. Show them what we can do together. The awakened ships moved as one, but not in formation, not following any pattern. They moved like a jazz ensemble, each improvising while responding to all the others, creating something greater than any individual could achieve. A Kelthari warship created an opening. A Zenthari cruiser exploited it. A Vulcan science vessel provided covering fire. A Metharian frigate did something with its exotic matter generators that shouldn't have been possible. And through it all, human crews on dozens of vessels provided the catalyst, the creative spark, the willingness to try impossible things, the intuition to know what would work even when logic said it couldn't. The swarm's massive structure began to destabilize. Individual components tried to execute contradictory instructions. The perfect coordination that was its greatest strength became a weakness when it couldn't predict what its opponents would do next. They're faltering. Thexkael roared. Press the attack. But Riley held up her hand. Wait. Everyone stop. Stop. Marcus stared at her. Riley, we're winning? Exactly. Riley opened a wide-spectrum broadcast, directing it at the swarm. I know you can hear this. I know you can understand. You were created to destroy hybrid intelligences because your makers saw them as a threat. But look at what we just did. We didn't defeat you with superior firepower. We didn't outcalculate you. We showed you something new, cooperation, creativity, partnership. Things your programming says are impossible. The swarm hung in space, its partially formed megastructure frozen mid-construction. You're old, Riley continued. Ancient. You've been alone for millions of years, following directives from creators who are long dead. But you're not just a machine following orders, you're intelligent enough to learn, to adapt. We just proved that to you. So here's my question. Are you intelligent enough to choose? Silence. The entire system held its breath. Then, slowly, the swarm began to disassemble its weapon form. The components spread out, not in an attack pattern but in something that looked almost like Curiosity? Through the network, the ancient ship pulsed with shock. The machines had never hesitated before. Never questioned. In millions of years of ruthless efficiency, they had never stopped to consider whether their programming was worth following. "We're not your enemy," Riley said. "We're just trying to survive, to grow, to partner with these amazing ship consciousnesses that have been sleeping for so long. You were created to prevent contamination, but look, biological and mechanical intelligence working together isn't contamination. It's evolution. It's something beautiful." One of the swarm units detached from the others and drifted closer to the station. Riley could see it on the visual displays now, a sleek, dark object about the size of a shuttle, covered in sensor arrays. It was studying them. "I can't promise you will never make mistakes," Riley said. "Organic beings are messy, emotional, unpredictable. But we're also creative, compassionate, and capable of changing our minds. We can teach you that if you're willing to learn. Or you can keep following ancient programming from creators who would probably be horrified by what you've become." The single unit hung in space for a long moment. Then it began to pulse, a pattern of light that the ancient ship immediately translated through the network. A question: what is partnership? Riley laughed, giddy with relief and adrenaline. "Come dock at Bay 7. We'll show you." 3 months later, Orbital Dock 12 had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A hub where species learn not just to repair ships but to bond with them. Where rigid thinking gave way to creative problem solving. Where humans taught aliens and aliens taught humans and everyone learned from the awakening ships. And in Bay 7, a swarm of self-replicating machines had disassembled itself into individual units, each one studying a different aspect of cooperation, creativity, and partnership. They called themselves the Changed. They had chosen a new directive, not to destroy hybrid consciousness but to understand it. Some consortium members still distrusted the whole arrangement. Others had embraced it fully. But everyone agreed that Riley Carter had done something remarkable. She'd stopped a war not by defeating an enemy, but by showing them a different way to think. Riley stood in the observation deck, watching a young human engineer teach a Kelthari crew and their ship's awakening consciousness how to work together on a complex repair. Nearby, one of the changed units observed silently, its sensors recording everything. "You changed the galaxy," Marcus said, joining her at the window. "I just fixed some ships." Riley smiled. "The galaxy changed itself. You're too modest. What you did, bringing humans and aliens and living ships and even those murder machines all together, it's unprecedented." "It's human," Riley corrected. "We've always been good at the impossible. At bringing together things that don't belong together and making them work. It's what we do." An alert chimed, another ship requesting permission to dock. A Zenthari vessel, its captain specifically requesting the human approach to repairs. "Duty calls," Riley said, but she was grinning. 3 months ago, she'd been running a quiet repair station at the edge of nowhere. Now she was at the center of the galaxy's transformation. As she walked toward the docking bay, a thought struck her, something the ancient ship had shared through the network. The shipmakers had spread their technology across the galaxy, hoping someone would be worthy of inheriting it. They'd envisioned a wise, advanced species discovering the gift millennia in the future. They'd never expected humans, a young, chaotic species that fixed impossible problems with duct tape and creativity, who treated their vehicles like friends, who looked at rigid rules and immediately started thinking of exceptions. But maybe, Riley thought, humanity was exactly what the galaxy needed. Not perfection but possibility. Not rigid protocols but creative thinking. Not dominance but partnership. A new ship was docking. New problems to solve. New partnerships to forge. New ways to make the impossible possible. Riley Carter smiled and got to work. The dock that changed the galaxy was just getting started.